Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I thought I'd have some creative time for an hour or so. So I'm going to work in my journal. I love looking back at the journal and just seeing what I've created. It's just something really lovely to look back on. And you can create double page spreads or single page spreads, whichever you want, but it's really lovely to look back on. And this pink peg journal that I use, that I've got in the shop, really does take the moisture beautifully, because it's 300 GSM. I think it might be 350, but it's super thick and I just love it. I absolutely love it. This is what we're doing in a live workshop next Sunday. That's the page we're creating in a live workshop. But I thought we would create another project. So here we go. So we'll create another project, but nothing too taxing, because I don't need anything too taxing right now. So what I'm going to do is, I've had my hands all over these pages, so I'm just going to wipe over with my anti-static bag, just to prevent too much of the embossing powder. Can you see if I tap it, a bit of powder comes off, just to prevent the embossing powder sticking where I don't want it to. Now, if you tap it, just be aware that's got a powder in, you know, and if you've got any sort of breathing allergies or anything, just be aware of that. There is a powder in there. So I'm actually going to use Garden Elements. I want to use this background stamp here. So I'm going to use that one just to create a background. And this is quite a big stamp. Can you see? It's a beautiful stamp just in its own right. But with the stamp being A5, it's a really good size. And I didn't pick up my Versamark, I should have done. So let's just grab an acrylic block. And let's add this to the acrylic block. And I'm going to use my Versamark. You don't have to use an acrylic block if you don't wish. You can use it so that your stamping is a little bit more random. However, when I'm using something sort of this size, I use an acrylic block just to make sure that I get some of that image. It doesn't matter if I don't get a perfect image, because initially I'm just creating a background for my page. Can you see how many times I'm tapping that Versamark ink onto that stamp? Because I'm aware there's a lot of detail on that stamp, so I'm giving it a good pressing. So I don't, you know, I'm just deciding where I want to go. So initially, I'm just going to add the stamped image in its entirety just here. So I'm like I would with my VersaFine Clair and like I would with any inks, I'm just allowing that to rest on the page. And I often find when I'm having, even if I'm having a difficult day, just being a little bit creative really just sort of lifts my spirits. So this is perfect, just doing a journal page, just having the freedom to create whatever I wish, just because I feel like creating. So I've given that ink plenty of time just to absorb onto that page. Not that you can see anything. And guess what? I haven't grabbed a piece of copier paper. You should be used to me by now. I never grab a piece of copier paper. I'm hopeless. I always forget the copier paper. So let's, and at the moment, any purchases from my website, I'm sending a handmade card in the parcel this weekend up until Sunday till 11:30. So let's just sprinkle our embossing powder. Now my embossing powder seems to have bits of debris in, like bits of sharpenings and things. But I can see exactly where that is now. That's lovely. So let's get rid of that little bit of debris there. I've had this embossing powder ages, so it does get a little bit messed up. but you can see where I've got that embossing there. There we go. You can just see that. Now I'm working on a nice firm surface. If you've got lumps and bumps under your page because you've done other pages, put a hardback book at the back. So let's take this again. Whoops. And I'm going to ink the stamp once again. And I know you've got this size stamp, doesn't mean you can't make it larger or reduce it so that you only use part of it. And that's the wonderful part about stamps, the way they are so versatile to use, especially if your image is, you know, like this and it's got lots of detail. You can just use parts of that image, which is just wonderful. Just giving that a really good inking. And then I can just add this one here, I think. Yes. So I'll just add that one there. And again, I don't lift it straight away because that's when I'm going to get frustrated. I'm giving that ink time to do its job. You don't have to press so hard that those wrists hurt. You're just leaning on it, just giving it a little light press over, just so that each part of that stamp makes good contact with the cardstock. And it's not going to make good contact with the cardstock if you just plonk it down and then lift it straight back up. It's not going to be able to do its job. You just have to have a little bit of patience and just give that a little bit of time. And again, you can't see anything, which is really handy when you're demonstrating. So let's just add that embossing powder again. I do like to sort of give a little bit of a tap, just so that I can see what I've got. And now is the time for me to take it off the acrylic block. I keep dropping bits of embossing powder everywhere. So now I'm going to take it off the acrylic block, because now I've got sort of, oh, there's all embossing powder under here. I've got sort of the basis of my background. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pick out little parts. So I'll pick out a little bit here. And I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for little bits of stamping just to extend my design. So I'm just looking for little bits of stamping just to extend the design a little bit. So again, rather than sort of race on, I'm just going to add the embossing powder so I can see exactly what I am doing. And I can see, I'm going to lift this up just so that you can see just how you can extend this stamp. Just added a little bit of stamping here from part of the stamp, just extends that a little bit, which is just wonderful, just what I want. So let's take a different part. Let's take this sort of circular area here and let's add another part of that circle there. I've got a quality photopolymer stamp, so I can bend that slightly and it won't cause any damage. It's a quality made stamp. So I've extended that now with a little bit of that circle. And then I can look at the stamp and just pick parts out if I wish, especially if you've got it the right way. Shall we have a little bit of the butterfly? And I love that I can just play a little bit and just extend that design just a little bit, just with part of the design. So then we can grab our acetate, and I won't get too much embossing powder, just at the back of there because I know exactly what I'm like. I am terrible. So let's just sprinkle that embossing powder again. There we go, I've got parts of that on there. So at the moment, I'm just creating a background. Now, if you look at the stamp, I have got bits of embossing powder on there. What did I say? I'll try and do this not to get any embossing powder on. Just give it a wipe if you've got a bit of embossing powder on there. But also on here, we've got these little blackbirds. So I can add these with the Versamark as well. So we've got the little blackbirds. And I can just add them as part of the design. Just add them to the bottom. And you can sort of add as much as you want just to extend the design just a little bit. She said, trying to reach a scrap copy of paper. There we go, I've got those on there as well. And then we can proceed to heat the embossing powder and then add some colour. So let's just close this up. And I'll faff ages trying to turn the lid. What am I like? Embossing powder in here, not a good idea. And let's grab that heat tool. And I'm just going to allow the heat tool to just warm up a bit. And while that warms up a little bit, I'm just going to check if this is a little bit of debris. That's okay. So I've sort of got a background that I can work with. Now, when I'm looking at this, I can see that I've got after I've heated it up, I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to show you. I've got a little bit of a gap there. So what I can do is, let's have that one. So I'll just take this little blackbird here. Just ink that up. And I'm just going to add that little blackbird just there. So don't worry if you've missed a little gap. Doesn't matter. Even if you've missed a little gap, you can leave that gap if you want, just so that you've got the open space. You don't want to cover the whole area. It's nice to have some open space. And when I do the design, if I add layers, some of this will be covered up anyway. But in the meantime, I do like to show you how you can sort of layer upon layer, even if you're going to cover some of it up. I've now added that little blackbird. So again, we'll heat the heat tool up again that I started doing before and then turned it off again because I'm good like that. So I'm just making sure we heat that up a little bit before we actually go to our book. And it just takes a while, especially when you're using this type of heat tool, just for that to start moving. I'd rather use this kind of heat tool than the ones that have got the point, because sometimes for me they're a little bit harsh with the heat. It's full on. I know there's some that you can change temperature and everything, but I do like to use this one. So it just takes a little bit longer just to get that moving, and once it's moving, we're okay. What you need to remember to do is just turn your page a little bit as that starts to melt. And as it starts to melt, remember to move your heat tool. And you don't have to worry so much about the page bending in your journal, because by the time you close the book, it just helps that to flatten out a little bit. Now you've got quite a large area here that you are embossing, so it will take a few moments just for that to emboss. But once it has embossed and melted, move the heat tool away from that area so that you don't heat the same area. Just moving that around just so I can see areas that once you start to melt, you can then see areas that you've missed, especially if you've got a good light. Nice to have a little hair on there as well, lovely. And I do love a little bit of white embossing when you're going to add some colour. It really does make that pop a little bit. Now, have we got all that? Let's move that heat tool away. Yes, I think we've got the majority of that, so that's absolutely fine. We've got that little bird's foot. There we go. So then your page is going to bend a little bit, but as I've said, once you close the journal, that will sort that issue out, because it'll just flatten out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some colour. I'm going to grab some kitchen roll, just so that should I have quite a bit of moisture or anything, then I can just mop anything up, and I can also use this to hold my page. Let's just, there we go. So I can just use this just to hold the page as well. So the first colour I'm going to take, I'm sorry about putting my arm across, I've got the ink pads at the top. So I'm going to use Wilted Violet. So we'll take a little bit of the Wilted Violet. And I'm just going to add a little bit of the Wilted Violet. And I don't want to add too much colour of one colour straight away, because I want to be able to add more should I wish. And this is what I love about white embossing, because it just pops against the background. And if you want an easy sort of idea for a background, this is it. I'm then going to use Salty Ocean. So let's take that Salty Ocean. And you can see I'm not placing my hands on there, just in case I've got any moisture on there. I'm not adding that to the card. And I'm just adding little bits of the colour at the moment. I'm then going to go, she says, trying to find it, to Twisted Citron. And would you believe it, the only blending brush I haven't got is a green. Typical. I pulled out all the blending brushes as I thought, but not a green. So I'm going to take Twisted Citron. And I'm giving that a really good layer of colour, mainly because mine is sort of quite dry, so I just have to be aware of that. So just a little bit. There we go. So just a little bit of green. And then I'm going to go to Fossilised Amber. And I'm going to end up with ink pads everywhere. So I'm going to use a little bit of Fossilised Amber. So let's use Fossilised Amber. Now, if I use Fossilised Amber by the blue, obviously it's going to create a green again. So I really don't want to do that. So add a little bit of the fossilised amber. Then I'm going to add some orange. And I'm going to be careful where I place the orange because I obviously don't want to create mud next to any purples. So I'm just being sort of mindful of that. Let's put that orange. And then I'm going to go to picked raspberry. So just take the picked raspberry and just really pick up that picked raspberry colour. Now if I go with the pink near the yellow, I'm going to make an orange. So I don't want to make sort of another orange because I've already got orange on there. So I don't want to make too much and change the colour. So what I'm going to do now is go back to the original colour, which is the which is the wilted violet. And now I can see if I want to add a little bit more, and make sure you can see what I'm doing, a little bit more of the wilted violet, not twisted violet, oh dear me. So I can come in now, and if I want to add more of the wilted violet, I can then come in and add a little bit more of the wilted violet. Again, just be mindful where you're adding that. So just be very mindful where you're adding it. And then I'm going to take the blue, which was the salty ocean. And what you can see I'm doing is just like I would with pencils, the way I colour with pencils, adding layers, and you can see I'm adding those layers of colour. But I'm extending some of the colour. As you can see, it goes slightly green there. So I'm just going to, oh, I've just gone into the purple. Let's just clean that brush off. Just go into the blue. And I'm adding the layers of that colour, just so I've definitely got some blue on there. And you can bring a little bit of the blue in a different area if you wish, just so it's more relaxed. Right, let's just move these blending brushes out of the way. Mainly because I want a little bit of space. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take my kitchen towel, the clean area of the kitchen towel, and I'm just going to dab. You can wipe over if you wish, but I don't want to do that on this occasion. I'm just going to dab, just to lift the colour, just so that I don't smear the colour into the different areas. And each time I'm going to go in with a clean piece of that kitchen roll, because if I don't, all that I'm going to do is take that colour and plonk it straight back on to the page again. So let's take that again and let's just dab. So now, oh no, clean Tracy. So now you can see where I've added my stamped image, and I will dab over that a little bit more afterwards, but you can see where I've gone now. So what I'm going to do, I'll just leave all the lids off. Let's take an acrylic block, just use that as our palette. I'm going to take fossilised amber. Tracy can't speak. Fossilised amber, and I'm going to take some water. Let's make sure. And I can hold this now. I can sort of pick this up, and then I can add a little bit more intensity of colour in areas. So let's pick up a little bit more of that. And I'm going to add splashes of water in a minute, but not quite yet. Let's just add a little bit more of that fossilised amber. Actually, we can just spritz. Let's just spritz our acrylic block. So we've got the main colour down there, and now you've sort of got your paint palette, and you can bring in a little bit more intensity of that colour and extend the colour a little bit, and you can make it a little bit more vibrant. Look, it's spilling onto my hand now, but that's because I was looking up at the camera and tilting my acrylic block. But what you can see, if you can just tip that, there we go. So you can add a little bit more of your yellow if you wish, just making, and I can see the intensity of the colour already. So I've got the yellow all over my finger, she says. Now make sure your acrylic block, or your little palette as we're calling it, it's actually an acrylic block, but we're calling it a palette. You can use a proper palette if you wish. I'm then going to bring a little bit more vibrancy of the pink. So let's get some picked raspberry. Now, of course, I need to make sure that that brush is free from the yellow pigment, just so that I've got the true colour of the pink. So let's pick up the pink, and you can just add little bits of your pink wherever you want. You can just make it a little bit more vibrant with your pink. And because you've got that water that you're mixing with the colour you've already added, that will add to some of the oxidisation. But you can sort of extend your pink area wherever you wish. Wherever you fancy adding a little bit of pink, you can extend that as much as you wish. You know, if you want to add sort of a little bit of pink in the centre, you can. Obviously, the embossed area, there's going to be no ink because we will clean that off just so there's no ink. But again, just spend a little bit of time just adding to the vibrancy. Again, we're going to clean that brush just so that we work with a clean brush. And then let's put the lid on the pink. I'm then going to take some of the blue, the Salty Ocean. Again, quite a powerful colour. So I'm just going to add a little bit more vibrancy to the blue, just so that the page again takes on more vibrancy with that colour. Again, if you mix it with the yellow, you're going to end up with the green. So it's entirely up to you where you want to add that. You can even sort of dab this onto there if you want, but I'm being a little bit more controlled just with the colour. I'm just being a little bit more controlled, just so that I don't just splatter it where I don't want it. So let's put the lid on the blue. Now let's just clean our brush now, because with the blue I'm going to go to the orange. So I'm just going to make sure that brush is really clean. I'm then going to go to some Spice Marmalade, because there isn't much of the orange tones on there. Again, let's just mop that water up. Again, I mean, this is obviously an orangey yellow as well, but let's just be mindful. Let's just add a little bit. Obviously, if I go into the blue, you're going to change that colour. So I'm just going to add a little bit more darker tones, so that's slightly more orangey than yellow. Wherever you hit with the H, Tracy, that embossing, obviously that is going to resist the ink, which is exactly what we want it to do. Let's add a little bit where the pink is. Just add that just where that pink is a little bit as well. I'm just spreading it out a little bit. There we go. Again, you can have a spare piece of card on one side, and then you can create a second background should you wish. I'm then going to take the strongest colour of all, which is the wilted violet. Just spritz that. Take that wilted violet. Just add a little bit more darkness of the wilted violet, just so it's got a little bit more of that purple on there. And the thing you will realise is, obviously, as you touch another colour, if it's slightly wet, it can change things slightly. So just be aware of that. So I'm just dabbing that colour just in there. So I'll just give that a wipe now. I'm just going to clean my brush just to make sure that it's got that colour out of there. I'm then going to add the water to my palette or acrylic block, and then I'm going to take a fan brush. So let's just take a fan brush and let's add some splatters of just plain water. The advantage of the fan brush, is it just adds those splatters a little bit more delicately, so finer, not such big splodges. So it just adds a finer touch of water. Let's grab some clean kitchen roll, mainly because that is absolutely covered in colour and soaking wet. So let's just what we've got now is a page that is quite wet. Can you see the shine? It's quite wet on there. And whilst it's quite wet, I'm going to add some Posca pen, some white Posca pen. And the reason I'm adding it when it's wet is it's sort of like that. It sort of fans out into that moisture, and it just adds to the effect of the background. But what you need to make sure that you've got is that your Posca pen is flowing, and what will happen is that Posca will diffuse into the background. So we'll just leave that for a few moments now, just to do its thing. So when the background is wet, you're not going to end up with splatters. The Posca pen is going to sort of diffuse out because it's paint and just bleed out into those colours and just soften those colours just a little bit. Right. We're then going to grab my circular template, and we're going to grab a spare piece of card, she says. Let's grab some card. So I've got a bigger piece of card and I'm going to decide on the circle. So let's have a largish circle, which is about 3 1/4. Doesn't matter what the measurements are because you can just use any circles. So and that one's about, I think, 2 3/4. And then shall we have a smaller one? So let's have a smaller one. So I'm just creating an arrangement at the moment. So I'm going to cut those circles out. Those of you that have got dies, you can obviously cut out a circle. If you don't have a die cutting machine, don't worry, just draw around a jar, the lid of your glue, the lid of your paints, and then you've got a circle. Draw around a saucer, a side plate, a little espresso coffee saucer, anything that you've got to hand. There we go. And don't worry if you haven't got a die cutting machine and that your circles are not perfect. That doesn't matter because I'm going to distress the edges. So don't forget, some of your background is going to be covered up, so it doesn't matter one jot about missed bits or anything. It really doesn't matter. You're just adding to those layers. But if you try to be too regimented with your background by trying to place things maybe not where the circles are going to be or whatever, it doesn't work because it's too stiff, it's not loose enough, so it doesn't create a natural background. So what I'm going to do then is distress mine. Now, lots of you have got distressing tools, etc. I'm going to use the edges of my scissors. Now, just be careful. I have to say this because obviously I'm doing an educational video. If you've got scissors, please make sure that you're very careful because they are sharp. I know some people say, oh, you shouldn't use the edges of scissors. I personally don't see the problem. As long as you're careful and you're doing what I'm doing, I just can't see how you can go wrong. So just take your time and just distress those edges of your circle. So we're going to do that on every one. And then you just need to remember just to clean your area a little bit because you'll have all the little bits of debris of the edges of the card that have just dropped onto the surface of your non-stick craft sheet. So just make sure that you give that a little bit of a dusting off. So I'm just distressing my circles. There we go. So then we'll just clean that off onto the floor like you do. Of course you do. So I'm just going to give this a slight waft dry, just so that we're not working on something that is completely soaking wet. But this Pink Pig journal is amazing. It's just wonderful. It takes the moisture nicely. So then I'm going to take them, what's this? Kitchen towel. And I'm just going to dab the white embossing just once more. And you'll see obviously there's less colour to lift. 1, I've dried it. And 2, I've already done this once. But you still lift a little bit of that colour. You don't need to worry too much about the centre area because we're going to add our circles. There we go. I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me, there's something about when I do videos that I sneeze. Most of you'll know that by now. So what I'm going to do now is take the same background stamp that we've done before, and I'm going to start with a little bit of the purple. I'm then going to use the Salty Ocean. Then I'll use a little bit of Twisted Citron. Fossilized Amber. A little bit of orange. A little bit of the pink. Just clean that up. I'm then going to hold my stamp like so. Hold my spritzer bottle and just catch all that little bit of moisture. And I'm then going to press, can you see I'm holding this part up here? I'm just going to press that and hold this part of the stamp up, just so that I get it a little bit more freeing. It's not quite so as the stamp is. It's a little bit more free, and I'm changing the areas of the stamp a little bit. So you're just getting little bits of that stamp. Don't worry, it's not meant to be perfect. You're just getting little bits of the areas of that stamp. Okay, so you've just got that in colour, just little bits of it. So then you're going to wipe your stamp, because this one's going to be in the background, so don't be too sort of strict on yourself. I then need my black ink pad, which I've got somewhere. So don't be too strict on yourself with that colour. It's just to add a little bit of colour to the background. So let's just give that a dry. Now I want to pick little areas with some black ink. So we'll take the butterfly. And then let's have that like that. I'm just going to place my hands on there. Don't squish it too much. You don't want to squish that too much. So you've got the butterfly on there, but you want to still see some of this colour. So let's take the little clock from up here. Just a little bit of that clock. You can wipe off any bits that maybe you don't want. So I'm going to put a little bit of the clock just here. There we go. So I've got little bits of that now that I can just add to my background. And then I'm going to bring this one down here, you see, like so. So you don't want to sort of worry about your background too much. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give this a clean. These wipes are hopeless. So I'm going to give this a clean, mainly because I'm going to go back to the colours now. So let's pick those colours again. So let's have the Wilted Violet. And this time you can see I'm pressing a little bit harder than I did the first time. Let's go to the blue. So I'm pressing a little bit harder with that colour. Then we'll go with a little bit of the green. A little bit of fossilized amber. And then I think I'll just go straight to the pink. Let's move this up here for you so that you can see, which you can't at the moment. A little bit of the pink just here. A little bit of pink there as well. And I'm just going to, let's move these bits of card. I'm just going to hold my little spritzer bottle high up, and this time I'm going to take the circle and I can aim it wherever I wish. So let's just aim it so that it's sort of got a bit of everything. So I'm just pressing the circle onto there because I can align that and I can see exactly where it's going. And then we'll just lift this up. And now I've got the beautiful coloured imagery just here that I can add just to the background. I can then pick this up for the smaller one and I can just add little bits of the imagery just wherever I want onto the background. Just perfect. Again, if you want to spritz that stamp, you can spritz it again and you could quite easily create another print. There's a little bit of green here, so let's add a little bit of green there. So you could spritz that stamp again and you'd get a lovely print from that to go onto another card. Get off, Tracy. Onto another card. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adhere the layers I've created so far onto my piece. Let's create this. Doesn't the time go quick? So I'm going to add my adhesive. I think I need to fill my bottle up again. Surprising how much you get through. But I'm actually using less glue by using this bottle. I'm going to add this around there, like so. Then going to take this one here that's just coloured. Just add that here. I think what is best to do is just use this piece of copier paper that I had the embossing on, and I'm just going to just press those circles just onto my background because I don't want to put my fingers on there just in case. And I'm then going to add this here. So we just add that here. So I've now got the basis of my layers just to add my focal imagery and more layers. I haven't done a layered piece for ages. So what I'm going to do is just take a few moments just to clean my hands, mainly because they're in a total mess, and just so you can see the background we're building. Let's just close that drawer a little bit. So now I want my focal image that I want really sort of black. So I'm going to use, where are you? Not that one. Oh, it is that one. I'm going to use TE32 Alpha Florals, and I'm going to use this floral here, which is very striking and it'll look lovely against that in the black. So we'll just take this, and what did we do with the spare card? Who knows? We did have some. Where are you? There you are. Let's move this page just out of the way a little bit, just so that we can see what we're doing. So let's move the Versamark out of the way at the minute. Then we'll take our black, and we've got this beautiful, which you've seen me do in lots of different colours, but this time I'm going to use it as a silhouette because it will really pop against that background. It'll pop really nicely. And again, with your VersaFine Clair, don't be in too much of a rush. Just give that time just to absorb onto the surface of that card. Now this is a VersaFine Clair, so it has a good open time, which means it stays wetter longer, and it's beautiful for your detailed stamps. So let's just grab a bigger pair of scissors just so that I've not got so much card to work with. There we go. And I'm just going to use my Pergamano scissors, which are my scissors of choice for cutting out the fine detail. It's just what you get used to, I suppose. I'm going to leave a little border just around each of the pieces, just to make that stand out just a little bit more. I just love the shape of these petals when they're cut out. And you can see, to make it easier on myself when I'm cutting out, I actually turn the card rather than anything else. So I'll just turn that card like so. And sometimes I personally think it's really good to show the steps from start to finish, just so you can see how long a project takes from start to finish. And you can see I'm just sort of twisting my card a little bit so that I don't sort of go round in a perfect circle. It's a bit more of a jagged edge just to the top of that floral, just to give it a more natural feel. And you can see that I'm trying to avoid holding my fingers onto the ink, because I haven't dried the ink and I haven't blotted the ink. Now, if you think you're going to touch the floral too much, give that ink a little bit of a blot or dry it, then you won't get any smudging. You can just get a little bit frustrated and get smudges if you leave your hand on the focal image too long, because the moisture from your fingers reacts with the open time in the VersaFine Clair. So just remember to give that a blot or a dry, just so that you don't smudge too much. You might find it easier to cut out the whole stem first, because the stem's a little bit finer. If you keep most of the floral in the actual card and cut the finer areas out first, that's often a little bit easier. So I've now got this lovely bold floral, and against those colours it's really going to pop just against those colours. You can decide where you want to place your floral. I like having a little bit of that clock and the butterfly on show a little bit. You can move it around wherever it's pleasing to your eye. So I often like to have a little play around. So I'm going to add the adhesive. Now, I'm not going to add the adhesive to each of the petals, just to the centre, down here, little bit up here, but I like to have a few areas that are a little bit loose. Let's have you around about there. There we go, just hold that down. So I've not sort of stuck down these, it just gives it a little bit of movement. And then, you know, you've got movement in the petals a little bit. So I don't necessarily stick everything down, even though my page is going to go on the top of that, but that doesn't matter. But that bold black floral sort of pops against that more colourful background. So I'm going to stamp another floral, but I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. There you are. I was like, where's the floral gone? Let's make sure we're picking up that black ink pad. And a lovely lady in my group, oh, who was it now? Can't remember. I always put the date on my VersaFine Claire, but I never write the colour on the back. But if you write the colour colour on the on the back, then the idea is Tracy won't keep picking up the sand dune because it says black. We'll see. We'll see how many times I pick up the sand dune instead of the black. But I always write the date on there so I know how long my VersaFine Clairs are lasting. But it's a good idea to write the colour on there if, like me, you're a dozy drip and you keep picking up the wrong colour. So let's just pick that up. Now I'm going to make this floral a little bit shorter, but I won't decide on how short until I've physically cut that out. And the only reason I cut the card down is so that it isn't quite so cumbersome when I'm cutting that out. So initially I'll just cut the whole of that out first. And let's just cut this out again. And it's a lovely floral. Also, you know, when you colour it, I've coloured it lots of times in the Thrinchies and shown you how to colour it so that you don't have to have it as a silhouette stamp. And again, that's why stamps are just so beautifully versatile, because you can use them in so many different ways. And then again, when I get to this top here, I'm just going to sort of move my card so that my scissors go all over the place a little bit, so that it's not so regimental. There we go. And if you wanted to keep that bit in, so you've got more stability, you can come down, cut this little bit out first, just so that you've then not fighting with all the wobbliness, then it's a little bit easier to handle, because you're not cutting out that fine bit when this is out of the card. Just makes it a little bit easier for you. Of course, you can cut the excess card off if you wish. There we go. So then just go up here. You get used to a certain way, the way you cut out, don't you? Or I do anyway. So let's cut this out. There, we've not got that wobbliness. I can just cut out this little bit now. Let's make that not so square. Yes, you two can faff. There we go. So then I'm going to bring in my page again, and I'm going to decide how short I want that. So I'm going to have, let's cut about that much off. There we go. Just so that I can bring this down here. There we go. So then I can adhere that, and those black florals really sort of go with the colours in the background. Let's press that down, just press that middle bit down. And again, I've not sort of pressing these down, I'm leaving those quite loose. There we go. So my composition is building beautifully now, just beautifully. So I'm going to add some shading now, but Tracy's got too many stamps out, so let's just place this back just so that we can just move that to the top and then move the acrylic block just out of the way. Just makes it a little bit easier. So we're then going to add a little bit of shading round here, around that circle, a little bit round here. Now I'm not going to add much moisture because obviously we don't want to react the oxides too much. We just want to give a little bit of shading round here, which just lifts that a little bit. Just adds a little bit of shading just round there. Then we're going to add a little bit down the stems of our florals. Let's add them down the stems of our florals. There we go. So just adding a little bit of shading around the floral just to make that just pop a little bit more. Just using my fine brush just to give that a little bit of shading. I'm then going to grab my Posca pen and I'm going to add a little bit more white to this. Just so that that stands out a little bit more. So I'm just adding a little bit of white just to make that top stand out a little bit more. And you can bring in these touches of white and extend them a little bit, just so that that works a little bit more as well. Let me just show you, just so you can see. Oops, I've added the shading around here. I'll probably add a little bit round here shortly, but I've sort of added dots of white just to that page, just a tiny little bit more. I'm then going to grab one of the pheasants from TE32. I'm going to grab one of the little pheasants. So that one. I'm going to take my black ink just making sure that doesn't fall. Just going to add the pheasant to here, like so. And again, because I've got that oxide ink underneath, I'm giving the pheasant a little bit of time just so that the ink absorbs on there really nicely. Just lovely. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to shake my black Posca, and I'm just going to add a few little black splatters. Let me just place this here because I know that I'll end up with a few black smears. Now, what I don't want you to do is add absolutely gallons of black splatters. You just want a few, just a few, so that it's echoed in the background. And you want that to dry a few moments. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shading here, and then you frantically look for your brush. There we go. Just pick up a little bit of that moisture and just give it a little bit of grounding. And then whilst the black dries, I'm going to just add a little bit of shading just around here. Just to make that just pop a little bit more. There we go. I'm going to come round here a little bit more as well. Just to bring that shading just around the outside edge. Just so that that has got a little bit more dimension to it. There we go. Just so it's got a little bit more of that dimension. And I'm then going to, let's move that there. I'll add my white Posca afterwards. So I want now, where is the, so let's just move this out of the way. Just then we haven't got too many stamps all over the place. It's TE37. I'm going to take TE37. I'm going to use the word flowers. You can spell the word out flowers from your alphabet that's on TE32, should you wish. I'm going to take that flowers word. And you can see I've picked up a stamp and it's got that black ink on there. So always be aware of that so that you don't go and transfer that to your work. I'm going to add the word flowers here. Is that F? I don't know whether I've touched that F, you know. Shall I? And faffing strikes again. There we go. So we've just got that flowers word on there. Just place that back. TE37. I've got all my stamps in order because it just makes it a little bit easier, or that is the idea. It's supposed to make it a bit easier. So let's add a little bit of shading under there, under the flowers. And I sort of just touch that with a little bit of moisture, just so that I don't spread that everywhere. I'm going to add some white Posca pen so that that can be drying. I'm going to give that a shake. And then I'm going to add some lovely white splatters now, and you will get splatters because the background isn't wet, so it doesn't sort of merge. You can add a little piece of card to your background so that you don't touch those words if you don't wish. I'm then going to take, let's just place this large background stamp back again, and the little blackbirds so that we don't lose those, and hope that we've got the packaging somewhere. Just want one final touch. Just place those in there. I'm just going to take TE36 and these circular numbers. I might just use the number 3, doesn't matter what numbers. So take a number 3. I just love how you can mix and match so many stamps. I love doing it. I also love just creating a sort of collage, stamping it in black, but creating your own collage from all the different stamps. That's fun as well. So we just take our number here. And actually, I don't want any white edge on this, so I'm going to cut that off. Just want it black. There we go. Just so that I can add one of my numbers here. Just take our adhesive. Just add one there. Like so. And I don't want to sort of clutter everything too much because it's so easy to do that. So I'm just going to clean the nib of my needle, the point on the glue, and then just fasten that back. It's so easy to over clutter things, and I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that I don't do that. So I'm just going to take a little bit of shading around there. Just add a little bit. Let's take a little bit of that water off. There we go. Let's just place that back. Clean this up. And then that is my journal page finished. And I just love it. Just a little bit of creative time just for me. I just love it. And what you can do then is you can just spend a little bit of time getting little bits of your kitchen towel and then just make these areas that are visible just pop a little bit more. So just take a little bit of moisture and then you can just make them pop a little bit more because it removes a little bit of colour just so that your areas in the background just pop. So I hope you've enjoyed that little bit of creative time together, and I hope you'll give that a go. It could quite easily be a card. It could quite easily be a French. You just do everything in smaller version. So love to all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.